Hi, I'm Namulanta Kombo, and my podcast, Dear Daughter, is available now. It's a handbook to life for daughters everywhere. Find out more at the end of this podcast.
I'm on a ramble in the countryside. It's a bit wet, it's a bit windy, but it's wonderful to be out here. Although, let's be honest, this landscape isn't really natural at all. A few thousand years ago, this would all have been forest. Now, today the trees are gone and I've got a clear view over a field of winter wheat. Now, think just for a moment what a field really is. It's a man-made structure. Really, it's a kind of giant solar panel, but instead of making electricity, it turns the sun's rays into digestible chemical energy, like this apple. Hello, I'm Justin Rolat, and welcome to episode 2 of my Pyrotechnic History of Humanity. This week, I look at agriculture, which was arguably the original solar energy revolution. Why? Well, next time you have a bite to eat, think about this. We have never had it so easy. For millions of years, our forebears had to roam the wilderness in search of animals and plants they could cook and eat. Then, about 11,000 years ago, during the Neolithic or Late Stone Age, some humans settled down and began tilling the soil to grow their food. Now, to get a feel of what that was like for them, I tried swinging a Stone Age mattock myself. It's a kind of stubby pickaxe used to till soil. There was just one problem, though. I was just trying to say how well it was working, and then...
And I was about to take a photo.
And then it broke. That's Claire Walton, by the way. She's the resident archaeologist at Butser Ancient Farm in southern England. Oof. That is quite hard work.
That's why I was so pleased you're here. Because after you've left, we've got some more people coming to dig it over today.
The farm is a kind of archaeological experiment. Claire learns about the history of agriculture over the last 10,000 years by recreating past buildings and artefacts, including that mattock I just broke.
Yes, this is a beautiful looking item. It is made of a cow's scapula, so there's a shoulder blade from a cow.
So what we've got here is the really basic early farming technology.
Absolutely.
10, 12,000 years ago.
So early agriculture is incredibly hard work. The investment in terms of man hours into an agricultural field is enormous by comparison to hunting and gathering only for the food that you need for that day. So it's a completely different mindset. You start having to think about the future all the time. And every day must have been something that you had to do in the fields, whether it was pests or hoeing. You must have been exhausted all the time. And actually what you gained from growing crops in a field really wasn't of any advantage nutritionally over hunting and gathering. In fact, we went from something like 22 staples in a hunter and gatherer diet to about 11 staples.
So why on earth did we do it then?
I can't easily answer that question, and many academics haven't. I'm not sure we'll ever really work it out.
Maybe not, but there are at least some academics trying to figure it out.
Yeah, my name is Dr. Robert Bettinger, Distinguished Professor Emeritus at University of California, Davis.
Robert points to some important circumstantial evidence. Farming began after a huge and abrupt change in the planet's climate. Before then, the world was still locked into the last ice age, also known as the
Pleistocene, which is very cold and dry. And you can't do agriculture in the Pleistocene. You can't keep up with the changing nature of the climate.
Temperatures rose and fell dramatically during the Pleistocene.
We're getting changes from a cold, dry to a warm, wet interval, and it happens in 10 years. If you develop a particular kind of plant system around a particular climatic regime, and in 10 years that goes away, it's just a game you can't follow.
Then, all of a sudden, about 12,000 years ago, for reasons that are still not entirely understood,
Bang! It gets a lot warmer.
the temperature rises rapidly to about what it is now, and it stays there.
And literally, within the first 2,000 years, all over the world, you're getting people domesticating crops. That's not just sort of a gradual change, that's a sea change.
So what happened? Well, Robert thinks the warmer climate plus a big rise in carbon dioxide levels was very plant-friendly. Suddenly, there was an abundance of plants to eat.
And what that really means is you start to depend more on plants, you can support more people per square unit of ground. And so as the extra energy those well-fed plant gatherers were collecting went into feeding lots of children and grandchildren, Robert thinks the population quickly expanded to gobble up the cornucopia, leaving them with a bit of a headache. I have this extra child when conditions were good. Now conditions are bad. How do I make do with that? I'm going to try and plant those seeds in places that they don't normally grow and see what happens there.
So farming may have started out of necessity, but Robert also thinks there was something else going on. When you get much denser human populations, over time, people start to accumulate more knowledge.
The greatest invention hunter-gatherers ever had was the bow and arrow. But as populations started to dwindle in certain parts of the Arctic, guys just forgot how to make them. The population sizes got so small. So we think then that there's a feedback effect here to agriculture allowing populations to go further. Larger populations mean that the information that's gathered about this thing and that behavior grows incrementally as well.
What Robert is describing is a kind of virtuous circle. As our energy sources in the form of wild plants became more abundant, human populations rose. Denser populations were better able to learn, communicate, and remember how to manage these plants. And this growing body of agricultural knowledge and technology led to even bigger energy surpluses.
We're going to walk through the first purpose-built burrow tube.
Today, the UK Centre for Knowledge About Plants is Kew Gardens. I popped into the herbarium to pay a visit to ancient farm crops expert Mark Nisbet and to see firsthand what was perhaps the most significant agricultural technology of all, one that transformed the very foods we eat.
So I've pulled this folder out of the rice cupboards, and this is Oryza rufiopogon, which is the wild ancestor of cultivated rice.
Oh, and you've actually got the real plants in here.
Yeah. This arrived at Kew in 1867, was collected in the field in India, but it's rather straggly. It's got rather thin stems. It tends to lie quite close to the ground when it's growing. You can see relatively small seed spare. Then here you've got a beautiful domesticated rice, Oryza sativa here, and you can see that the stems are a lot more robust. It's got this mass of seed heads on it.
In other words, modern rice, the stuff you buy in the supermarket, is a far more productive plant. And this is the result of domestication. Every year, farmers, by accident as much as by design, chose the best seeds to sow for next year's harvest. And over the course of centuries, that transformed the plants we eat.
So one of the earliest changes that we see in the archaeological record is an increase in grain size. If you're sowing seed, it's relatively easy to observe larger seeds. They outcompete other plants in the early stages in the field. And it's been calculated that simply that change to larger grains could increase your yield by around about 40% or so.
These new domesticated plants transformed the food energy equation. They demanded less energy to produce and supplied more energy to our guts. And it wasn't just grains like rice. All across the world, all kinds of plants were being domesticated, creating foods radically different to the wild variants our foraging ancestors had survived on.
Like wheat and barley and pulses.
These are the foods we eat today.
Maize and beans in Mexico, beans again, and potatoes high in the Andes.
In the Near East, we have pigs and sheep and goat and cattle. In China...
And it wasn't just plants people were domesticating.
chickens in Southeast Asia, water buffaloes in South Asia, and yaks in Tibet.
Melinda Zeder is a world expert in the archaeology of animal domestication at America's Smithsonian Institute. And just like those Neolithic farmers swinging their mattocks, she says the first animal herders were also having to think a lot more about the future.
They were going from a hunter's strategy, where the hunter is going after a larger meat package by going after large adult males, to a herder strategy, which is more interested in having the longevity of the herd.
In other words, they were switching from the unreliable energy windfalls of the hunt to a more dependable energy source that required patience and careful long-term management. Gradually, over thousands of years, it transformed what were once wild beasts into something more like the ancient breed sheep here on Butser Farm, more docile, less threatening, and less prone to bolt. What this amiable flock of sheep provided was a convenient way for those herders to store solar energy. The sun's energy is captured by the grass through photosynthesis. These sheep then graze on it and use that same energy to grow their own bodies, which the herders could then slaughter and eat whenever it suited them.
You are banking energy in the form of the living animal. It's a mobile food locker. Once you begin using these animals for things like milk, you've got now a regenerative resource. You don't have to kill the animal. And as technology gets better at it, you're finding ways to store that milk in the forms of cheeses and dried milk products that then become a bankable energy source.
And meat and cheese weren't the only bankable energy source. It was the same story with domesticated plants, above all in the form of grains like rice and wheat. Here's Mark Nesbitt again.
Grains are the kind of ultimate power package. So you're harvesting something that's dry, but it's ready for storage, but it's packed full of starch, but it's also got useful protein, it's got a useful amount of oil, and it's a really portable package as well.
Farming may have required hard, arduous labour, but the grain we harvested turned the sun's rays into a kind of energy currency. You could bank it away in a silo to consume at your leisure during the winter months, or you could cart it off to market to trade with others, or invest it in planting the next harvest, or in fattening up your animals. Meanwhile, those animals didn't just convert solar energy into meat and cheese, they also converted it into labour by pulling carts and ploughs. Think of farm animals as the original power tools.
You can break much more ground for plowing if you're using cattle for traction. You can also use these animals in clearing forests and so on.
I mean, in a sense, in terms of humans' use of energy, this is a really important step, isn't it? Because we're now outsourcing energy to animals.
Yes, very much so. You are able to produce a higher yield with fewer people.
As the centuries passed, animals and plants domesticated in different locations would coalesce into a kind of agricultural package. The crops fed animals, the animals worked the land, their manure fed the crops, and as a package, they provided a much more reliable and abundant food source. It's that virtuous circle again. More food energy meant more people who could then expand into new territory and develop new technologies that produced even more food energy.
It's called a bowl furnace, and it's essentially just a small scoop in the ground.
Back at Butser Ancient Farm, metallurgist Fergus Milton is demonstrating the most revolutionary of those new technologies, the smelting of copper, first discovered about 5,000 years ago.
So it's about the volume of a bucket maybe, and in one side I have a clay pipe for pushing air in so that the charcoal will burn hotter and get to the temperatures I need to convert rocks into metal.
Charcoal, of course, comes from wood, which grows through photosynthesis. So just like our plants and animals, it ultimately derives its energy from the sun. Oh, yeah. So there's a lot of dust and then a nugget, but it's quite a spiky one. But it is a distinctive copper colour now.
It's copper metal, and we can hammer that out. You can hammer copper blades and get them as hard as steel. It just won't last as long.
Grains, domestic animals, and now metal tools, all of them were the product of energy drawn from the sun via photosynthesis. This was a solar energy revolution, and it opened the door to an entirely new way for humans to live together.
So this is what we call the Iron Age enclosure. So it's a collection of roundhouses which date to anything from around 300 BC.
And if you're wondering what it looks like, it is the spitting image of the Asterix village. So in the Neolithic enclosure, I had that wonderful scapula from a cow. When we get to here, what kind of tools would people have been using?
So we've now moved to an iron matic instead. The iron makes it so much harder that it's almost impossible to break the metal part of the tool.
And it's also a lot sharper.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you use that tool, you're going to exert far less energy, and you could therefore matic for longer. So in that way, you must be able to feed more people. Some people may stop farming and start doing other activities like making the tools that you need to be a farmer, that farmers were too busy farming to make these things themselves.
What Claire is talking about is a division of labour, which allowed people to specialise in entirely new roles, like smelting metal, for example, increasing what human communities as a whole could do.
Once you have division of labour, urban settlement would start to appear as people all have to live close to each other to have access to their needs.
So the small village that we're in became a larger village, became a town, became an early city.
That's exactly what happened, yes.
The energy needs of these larger, more complex communities were sustained through the accumulation of huge surpluses of grain, and this created a problem.
Well, once you've got surplus, you have to store it. Living collectively where you have to protect your surplus, because if you've managed to create a lovely surplus, somebody else might want your surplus.
So what you're talking about is the beginning of inequality, because, I might have a bigger surplus than you, and then,
Absolutely.
I'm doing better
Yes.
than you, and I've got more protection against a harsh winter than you have.
This is one of the most fascinating things of all, is how it creates stratified societies of haves and have-nots.
It's worth considering how big a change this was. Go back a few thousand years to the Ice Age, and when a band of our hunting ancestors managed to kill an antelope, the meat windfall was shared out equally.
Property is public, so it's a common pot. Hunting is fun and the food tastes good, but plants are more drudgery intensive. Collecting the plants and processing them, storing them is a lot of labor.
The point is that nobody was going to do all that work if they then have to share their harvest with the guy next door who spent all summer lying in a meadow gazing up at the clouds. With farming, you reap what you sow.
And we see a real shift in where the storage of those resources is kept. We go from small round houses around central courtyards where everybody has access to rectangular houses where people build rooms and increasingly hide their storage within the houses.
But there were some people from whom you couldn't hide your valuable energy reserves, your grain, people carrying metal weapons.
We're arriving as a Roman villa. The materials that they used to build this are completely different from those of the Iron Age enclosure. This is a brick and flint and chalk construction. The Romans wanted you to see the grandeur of the buildings they had constructed.
This represents civilization. What role did agriculture play in establishing the basis of civilization?
So I suppose this ultimately represents control of those surpluses, because you have created transport routes that facilitate easy distribution, controlling it through this extreme diversification of roles. So many people worked in other roles which had nothing to do with agriculture, but who needed to be fed. And without people in charge at the top, there would be chaos. So I guess this ultimately is how you have these hereditary monarchies which develop, originally in the Near East, but over time it's seen all over the world.
And this represents an increasing inequality in society, doesn't it?
So in Roman Britain, obviously, most people were peasants. And then, of course, at the very top, you have the 1 or 2% who probably lived in a villa like this. And of course, they had an army that came with them. So that army had to be supplied with food.
So there'd be a taxation now?
There was a taxation, yes. British farmers were supplying the army with wheat, which means that the farmers had to work even harder to produce enough for themselves and to sell any surplus.
Inequality may have been deepening, but with centralised authorities controlling the energy surpluses from our increasingly productive agricultural systems, all kinds of large-scale innovation became possible.
So they created amazing systems of irrigation, they've got aqueducts. Engineering was applied to all sorts of agricultural technologies.
And this is a function of bigger, more complex societies because they can spread these innovations over large areas, irrigate whole valleys, that kind of thing. And of course, build roads as well, something the Romans are famous for.
Exactly. The Roman army played a large part in building the road network of Britain.
But of course, roads are no use unless you have something to ride on them, which takes us back to those power tools.
Horses probably domesticated in Central Asia sometime around 4000 BC, maybe a little earlier. Donkeys in Africa around the same time. We have Bactrian camels in Central Asia, maybe 3,000 to 4,000 BC. But they really kick into gear in the Bronze Age. We begin to see horses moving goods from China over into Mesopotamia, donkeys moving goods from Africa up into the Levant. So we begin to see global trade networks come into effect.
Global trade, cities, private property, governments, a growing population. All these things sound familiar to us today, and they were all made possible by the solar energy captured through agriculture. But for most people, there was one big thing that was still missing. 10,000 years on from the Neolithic, the first place we stopped, most of the people are still living and working on the land, aren't they? How much of their lifestyles actually improved?
I'm not sure their lifestyle really changed very much at all, not for most people.
So hold on, when we were in the Neolithic period, you said that the hunter-gatherers had a better lifestyle in terms of nutrition and just how much work they had to do than the early Neolithic farmers. And you're saying 10,000 years on, it hasn't really improved. It sounds like we've been caught in some kind of trap.
That's actually a really good way of putting it. They described the hunter-gatherer society as the original affluent society, and that they spent something like 20 hours of their week in what you would call proper labour. Now, there is no way that your Neolithic farmer or your Roman or your Iron Age farmer was only spending 20 hours a week of hard labour. I'm sure you could easily double that. Life was exhausting.
In other words, what agriculture failed to deliver was the affluent, leisurely lifestyle that more and more of us enjoy today. For that, we had to wait for the next big energy revolution, which is what I'll be looking at on next week's programme. The producer was Lawrence Knight.
Thank you for listening. There will be more from the documentary podcast soon. The documentary is just one of our BBC World Service podcasts. There are many others to choose from.
I would love to share some of these letters. They mean so much to me and to my girls.
It all started with me asking my friends and family here in Kenya to write letters to my daughter, giving her advice and telling her about their experiences.
You make some mistakes along the way, and that's part of life. And that's what even makes just being a woman enjoyable.
And then I won the BBC World Service's International Podcast Competition. So we're making a podcast full of letters to daughters everywhere.
I'm writing to you because I know one day you'll have questions and want to know why.
The result is Dear Daughter, a brand new podcast from the BBC World Service. Anything else you want to leave us with? Anything you want to say?
To our daughters, always wipe front to back. So that...
Search for Dear Daughter, wherever you get your podcasts.